Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be looking at a bunch of Future Box decks, or I guess they're not all Future Box, but they're all Future Pokemon. They actually all contain Iron Crown. That's kind of how I decided what cards to include. So there are a lot of lists that run Iron Leaves. That's a very popular card, and Iron Hands is popular. This Miraidon kind of defines the future box as well as Iron Crown EX. But first of all, before I get into things, I just want to ask you to subscribe if you're not. Most of my viewers are not subscribed, and I'm getting close to 1,000 subscribers. I'm not super close, but I'm pretty close. And when I do that, I got some really cool things planned. But anyway, aside from that, let's just hop into things. As I said, Miraidon is really important to Future Box. Excel Peak for one colorless on a basic. You do 40. Search deck for up to 2 basic energy and attach them to your future Pokemon in any way you like, then shuffle your deck. Of course, 40 is not a ton, so you want to be boosting this with Iron Crown EX. Cobalt Command here says all your future Pokemon's attacks do 20 more to your points active, not to their bench, but only to their active. And then you can stack this. It does not boost your own Iron Crown EX, though, or any of your other Iron Crown EXs. And you also have Twin Shot here, which for Psychic Colorless. Colorless does 50 to your opponent's Pokemon and hits through effects, but does not hit weakness. So that means it pretty much hits through Manaphy. And hit through Mimikyu, it's pretty useful, mostly for the Manaphy thing, but not a lot of the decks are going to be taking advantage of that. Some will, and it is a nice thing to consider. Aside from that, we should also talk about Reboot Pod, which is an ace spec. You can only have one ace spec in your deck, and it's an item card, and it says attach one basic energy from your discard pile to each of your future Pokemon in play. If you have multiple, or if you have like a bunch of future Pokemon and not enough energy, you choose the Pokemon. And as I said, it's all different Pokemon, so that's a little weird. I'll talk about, I think most of you know Iron Hands EX takes extra prize. There is Iron Bundle, which forces your opponents active to the bench. And there are some other future Pokemon not in this list, but Iron Leaves is Rapid Vernier. On play, you switch this into the active, and then you can move any number of energy from your other Pokemon to it. You don't have to move other energy, but you do have to switch into the active. You don't have to switch into the active when you play. You can choose not to use the ability at all. But what I'm saying is you can't choose to move the energy but not switch it to the active. So that's a thing to keep in mind. And then we also have Iron Treads here. This is interesting. Dual Core. Its ability says if it has Future Boost Energy Capsule attached, it is both metal normally, and then also Fighting type, which is pretty cool. This is the only Fighting type Pokemon I believe for Future, which is nice because that is potentially a decent type to hit. It's not an amazing type to hit for weakness, but in Future Boost Energy Capsule does 20 more damage, and it runs 4 copies, surprisingly, and then you get Free Retreat, which is pretty nice. But and you have Path Wheel, Metal Colorless, moving energy from this Pokemon to one of your bench Pokemon, which is potentially really nice because you're conserving energy. And as we'll talk about with this stack, well, I mean, I've covered all the energy acceleration already. And so you have the attack, and then you have a Reboot Pod, and that's it. That's all the energy acceleration you have. You can run other options, and there are some other cards we're going to talk about that will allow you to have more energy acceleration, like the Iron Treads, which I mentioned, which isn't acceleration but energy preservation. And so that can be useful. Of course, 60 isn't a ton, so as with the Miraidon, and honestly anything in your deck, you're looking to boost that damage. So the Miraidon, Iron Treads, you're looking to push into that one-shotting single prizes range, and so you can potentially boost things with the future booster energy capsule and Iron Crown up to 100 more damage. That's probably not going to happen, but certainly 60 damage is feasible. 40 is pretty easy to do, 40 extra damage. Especially with Techno Radar, right? It's a card, discard an item, or it's an item, discard a card from your hand, search for two two future Pokemon, put them in your hand. It doesn't get other future cards, but gets any future Pokemon, and that can be really useful, especially with the Iron Crown, so you get more damage. Iron Bundle, which as I said, it forces your opponent's active to the bench. When you use its ability, you discard from play, force your opponent's active to the bench. You can also wall evolutions, kinda. It's not that good, but oh wait, no, you can't use that in this list, but with your attack you can stop the defending evolution Pokemon from attacking. But yeah, so and then Iron Leaves also on play can move the energy to itself, which is, again isn't accelerating energy into play, but is accelerating energy to itself, which can be useful. We also see Energy Switch, which can be used for certain things. Specifically, it can be used to if you reboot Pod and then you want to get energy on a certain Pokemon, then obviously if you want 2 energy on a certain Pokemon or 3, you accelerate one with the reboot pod, and then you also go ahead and accelerate or move the other one over with energy switch. So there's a lot of different things going on here with that card. Aside from that, there is the Miraidon, and talk about Miraidon EX yet either. So this is an EX Dragon type, just like Miraidon. For Reject Bolt, you do 60, and then if your opponent's active has any damage counters on it, you hit 100 more. So that is going to be doing 160. Of course, a good damage number to hit is 220. You can do that with your second attack, or you can also do it with your first attack, which if you boost it by 60, which as I said earlier is doable. Is it easy? Not necessarily, but it's not too hard either. You need 2 Iron Crowns and a future booster energy capsule most likely. So that's pretty much the overview of the deck. And then what else do we have? We see it's a semi-turbo deck. We see like Radiant Greninja, which is kind of a turbo-y card. And we also see Iono, Research, Judge. So not super turbo-y, but pretty supportive reliant. We see Arvind, Houndstore. I feel like if you could fit Forest Seal Stone, that'd be nice, but then you need to fit in Pokemon Vs, and those don't naturally synergize with the deck, so that's a little awkward. Techno Raider also is really good for the deck, and that's pretty much the base idea of the deck. Also, TM Crisis Punch, kind of cool, hits 280. You can boost that, so it can literally one-shot. Well, it can't technically one-shot everything, but one-shots probably anything you're going to run into. There are technically Pokemon with, well, a lot of HP. There are Pokemon with you can essentially have 500 HP, but hopefully you don't run into that. Also, if my voice is sounding weird, sorry, my shoe got stuck and I had to unstuck it. But anyway, we also see Counter Catcher because you're so supporter reliant. You want to be able to gust without playing your supporter, and also you can't run Prime Catcher because you're running Reboot Pod. Aside from that, the deck's not super consistent. I will say I tested out. I played a little bit of post rotation, and I'm tempted to run a post rotation tournament, but I might not. But if I do, that'll be cool in the simulator. But aside from that, Reboot Pod is, I mean, it's kind of hard to find, right? You can find it with Arvin, but that's it. Next up, we have another list. This one runs. We see different counts of things, and we see actually a lot less Miraidons and Iron Crown EXs. But similar concepts here, leaning very heavily. So this list, it runs a bunch of lightning, a bunch of grass, a decent amount of psychic, and a little bit of metal. This list runs similar stuff, but it's mostly grass. We see gift energy for that draw power, and then higher counts of boss. So some interesting things there. Then we also see EXP share, and then Iron Hands, and then this new card called something Baton, Heavy Baton. So I'll talk about that in a second. But EXP share will conserve energy, and Heavy Baton will also conserve energy. This is really good on Iron Hands EX. If the Pokemon this card is attached to is in your active and has exactly 4 retreat and is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, move up to 3 basic energy from this Pokemon to your bench Pokemon any way you like, which is obviously that's pretty useful because it preserves a lot of energy, right? It'll preserve 3 energy on the Iron Hand, so pretty Iron Hands focused as well. We see BBX is like a soft draw engine, kind of like Radiant Greninja, and we also see more Arvins, more energy switches, and yeah, it's more tool focused as well. There's some pretty cool stuff going on here as well. I like the heavy baton. That's pretty fun because it gives you that energy conservation. One thing with heavy baton, if someone plays beach court, then it'll well, it changes the retreat cost, and in this case means Iron Hands will not trigger heavy baton, which will be bad for you because you'll be losing 3 more energy than you planned on. Next up, we have this list. This list is really straightforward. Also, I didn't say this at the beginning of the video. We're working from worst to best, I guess. These are from Limitless's City League tournaments. And so the bottom lists are in like the top 8, but like near the bottom of the top 8, and it works all the way to first place decks. This list is very straightforward though, heavy baton focused. And then we see another tool here, Maximum Belt, which does 50 more to your opponent's active EXs. So Iron Crown EX can buff it, obviously 20 each, and then this is 50. So potentially you can boost your Iron Hands or whatever by 110. So Iron Hands can be hitting 230, which is enough to one-shot in Pokemon EX for 3 prizes, which is really interesting. And that's obviously a lot of work to put in, though. Aside from that, we see Heavy Baton and Electric Generator. So this is Turbo Iron Hands, kind of. It's not exactly Turbo Iron Hands, but it's pretty similar to that. But then we do see Miraidon to kind of lean back on. This isn't really Future Box, but it's a future-based deck. And for those of you who like Turbo Iron Hands, this is Turbo Iron Hands, right? It's kind of like, it doesn't really, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Miraidon. I'm just going to say that. No, sorry, Miraidon EX, the deck that people currently call Miraidon. I'm not a big fan of that deck, especially post-rotation losing Flaffy. You need to go very turbo-y though, and this is turbo. Next up, we have another deck that's kind of similar to what we saw before, but we do see the Barrel Engine, we see 4 Iron Crown, and we see Iron Valiant. Iron Valiant has the ability that pings when it switches into the active. We also see it does 200 for Psychic Colorless, which can be very easily boosted to that 220, and we don't see the Miraidon EX in this list either. We see a bunch of EXP share, which are very good, and then we see Prime Catcher. We don't see Booster Pod, no, Reboot Pod, the A spec that accelerates energies. Then we see some Switch, although it is a little awkward to use Iron Valiant's ability in this list unless you are attacking with it. Aside from that, we also see normal, similar stuff, and keep in mind with Ultra Ball and Techno Radar, you can pretty easily shrink your hand down for the barrel. We see Team Devolution, which is kind of interesting as well. Oh, one thing, I didn't say what Iron Leaves' attack was. It's Prism Edge 180 for Grass Colorless, and that is decent. You know, as I said, you can boost damage up to that 220 margin, potentially 240, I guess, or even 260, but mostly you're looking at that 220. And then you can do that with only 2 damage buffs, which is pretty easy. Oh, one thing I don't love about this list, the barrel is obviously going to take up bench space, which is completely fine. Iron Crown will also be taking up bench space. I feel like you don't need 4 Iron Crown, but maybe if you're trying to push for something super aggressive, but this list doesn't feel super aggressive either, so I feel like you don't need 4 Iron Crown. And this next list is actually pretty similar to things we've seen before, leaning obviously very heavy into that Miraidon and Iron Crown, Reboot Bot, and this is like a very, I'd say, standard list, pretty turbo-y, all future Pokemon. We see some energy conservation, but a lot of just like go hard, go fast, and it's a really powerful deck and a really like fun concept where you just have these different options and you're just powering through the deck with like high counter supporters. We see 4 Research, 4 Iono, 3 Armor, and then 2 Boss and 2 Counter Catcher. Next up, this list is similar ideas. Again, we see that Iron Bundle. I do think Iron Bundle is kind of cool. It's useful turn 1, going second. You want to go second to attack with Miraidon to get energy in play. You can use Iron Bundle to send in Pokemon in the active to the bench, which can potentially be really useful. Aside from that, again, we see the Radiant Greninja, which I think is fine. It does get energy in the discard as well. Sometimes you may have issues getting energy in the discard if you're conserving them with the EXP share, or in this case, Heavy Baton, or some other thing. Or like, I don't know. The idea is that you need energy in the discard for Reboot Bot, though. You need potentially 6. I guess if Radiant Greninja is in play, and not 6. But yeah, very powerful here. We see energy switch as well for that Reboot Pod. And you're reliant on Reboot Pod in a list like this. If it's prized, that's kind of rough because you have lots of outs to it to search for it with Arvin, but that's it. Next up, we see another list. This one runs 2 Mew EX, some Ultra Balls to kind of draw. This is, again, pretty turbo-y. You can kind of go in with Iron Hands turn 2, and that's kind of a thing you might want to do. We see the 4 Lightning, the Iron Hands EX, and then the EXP shares, the multiple Iron Hands EX, I should say. Although we don't see Issue in Heavy Ball, which is kind of interesting and to me a little strange with the 4 Arvin. We also see 4 Boss. I don't know, I feel like this list is doing some weird things I'm not a massive fan of, but it's not too crazy different than the other lists either, to be honest. This next list, this runs some new attackers we haven't seen. We also see Pidgeot V and that 4 Seal Stone, which I mentioned earlier, which is kind of interesting, although it is a little hard to find Pidgeot V. You need to rely on Nest Ball and or Hisuian Heavy Ball because Techno Red doesn't get it. It's not future. Aside from that, we also see this Iron Hands. For Lightning Colorless, it does 80, but 80 more if your opponent's active is an EX or V. The base 80 is not terrible. Also, you could do Volt Wave for 30, 30 for Lightning Colorless, and on a coin flip, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. That can be okay. I mean, if you paralyze them, right? Then you can be hitting 50, 70, 90. That's not too bad. But then also, the 160, you can, as I said, boost it to that 220 or whatever. You can one-shot Lugia VSTAR with weakness, which is nice as well. Aside from that, we see the Iron Frets. We see a lot of single prizes as well. We also see Iron Valiant, which has 2 interesting attacks. Gemini Laser for 1 colorless, 20 to your opponent's active and 20 to one of their bench. As I said earlier, Iron Crown as well as Future Boost Energy Capsule. They don't boost damage to the bench, but they do boost damage to the active. So if your opponent has a Pokemon on the bench with 20 extra HP, which can happen, then you can go in with Gemini Laser, and then you do 20 to their bench to finish that off, and then also like do a decent chunk to their active, potentially like maybe 60 or 80, and potentially take a KO. We also see Mind Needle, Psychic Colors hitting 120. If your opponent has like a Cramorant or some Pokemon like that, you can't really get super. Oh, okay, Cramorant's weak to Iron Hands, but some Pokemon you can't get with Iron Hands or Miraidon super easily. This Iron Valiant could be useful, especially with a lot of Psychic energy for the Miraidons and that type of thing. You can also attack with Miraidon, which is for Lightning Colorless, 160, but that's a little bit more awkward of an attack cost. It's the most awkward attack cost in any future Pokemon. Next up, oh wow, this is really interesting. So I've not looked at this list, but we see some interesting things here. Again, we see first of all Iron Boulder EX. Boulder EX repulse. First of all, Power Stamp 200 for Fighting Colorless, which could be useful. But then we also see the list has power. So yeah, Power Stamp is pretty decent. Can it really be used in this list? It can. It's pretty awkward though. But then you're looking at Repulsor Axe. So 60 during your opponent's next turn, even if it's damaged, even if it's knocked out, put 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon, which is a decent chunk. Add that to like a single prizer, and then you're just taking a KO, or add that to Iron Crown EX's snipe-based attack, and you're taking KOs with Iron Boulder EX, which is pretty nice. And honestly, I think it's a really interesting option. If you're hitting weakness, Repulsor Axe can be taking KOs on 2 prizes, but even you can just take KOs on 1 prizer, so it's like the single prize counter as opposed to some of the other single prizes. You also have Iron Hands. And then we also see, so no way to attack with any psychic stuff, which is a little interesting. We also see Weird ERV here. When it moves from the bench to the active, you may move any amount of energy from your other Pokemon to it. It does 40 free energy attached to this Pokemon. We do also see a couple of copies of double turbo energy, allowing you to attack easier with Iron Hands EX and Mew EX to copy. Also, you can draw, so that can be useful. And so we see some interesting options here. This is not how I'd personally build the list, but this is some cool options. Next up, we have, honestly, this list looks pretty straightforward and not too much to say about it. Yeah, it's fine, pretty straightforward. The one medal, I don't know if I love that, but I know some people would want to run the list like that. This list, again, has the one medal. Pretty straightforward. We do see Iron Valiant EX back, though, and I like that. This list is really interesting now. And this one runs a 1/1 Darkrai VSTAR. Darkrai VSTAR, of course, for those of you who don't know, has an attack which you can use, but it's pretty awful in this list. Yeah, but you can use the VSTAR power, which recovers 2 items from your discard into your hand. Of course, one of those items will be Reboot Pod, so you can reuse that, and then you can get it back, play it down again, and then just accelerate a bunch more energy. You can technically even play it twice in the same turn to get 10 energy in play. I wouldn't do that. That's like pretty much all your energy. That like won't happen, but that is technically an option. And then you also have energy switch to move energy around. We see Iron Valiant. We see some interesting options here. We also see Mortis Confidence. I didn't know what the conviction card I was thinking of. Is it Erica's? Um, Oh, Karen's Conviction. Anyway, so Mortis Confidence, you must discard a card from your hand to use this. Draw a card for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. It's like Zinnia's Resolve. It's slightly different, but pretty much the same idea. You discard 1 less, but you draw 1 less. And then, let's see, Pokegear. I don't know, pretty straightforward aside from that, but Darkrai VSTAR is a really cool inclusion because obviously it lets you reuse that item card, and I think that's really fun. I don't know if it's the best way to do things, but I do really like it. Next up, we have this list, which again looks pretty straightforward. Similar ideas to stuff we've seen before. 2 Iron Hands, or no, just 1 Iron Hands. 2 Iron Leaves, though. Iron Leaves does hit weakness on Charizard as well, which is partially why it's really good. And this list, again, pretty straightforward. This last list, okay, this is interesting. Mostly really straightforward. They do run Minior, though. Minior, for those of you who don't know, is primarily, well, it's a, yeah, okay, I'm looking at this list. It can be used as a counter to Iron Hands, but not usually. You need super effective. Wait, is super effective? Effective glasses rotating. Yeah, no, it's not. So I wasn't sure. I assumed it wasn't, but it's not. But Minior is a counter to Snorlax, and Snorlax stall or control is one of the best decks in the game, post rotation, pre rotation. I mean, it's really good. So Minior is a counter to that, and even though you do have some switch, you don't have a ton, so you do want to look for ways to counter that. and Muneor will probably let you win that matchup. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. As I said earlier, I'd love it if you subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. I'm going to be doing some more post-rotation content in the future, but I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.